The wind pushed low across the plains, whispering secrets through brittle grass, and over sun-bleached bones buried just beneath the earth. The house stood alone on that land, gray wood peeling, porch sagging like tired shoulders. A man leaned against the frame, arms folded, watching the horizon as if expecting something terrible to arrive with the dust. Or perhaps he hoped it would. He was the kind of man the war had not ended for. Skin leather from years beneath open sky, eyes like flint, set deep beneath a ridge of brow that rarely lifted. His right hand bore an old scar from a saber. He never covered it. He didn't believe in hiding what the world had already done to him. When the wagon finally appeared, he didn't move, just watched it crawl across the land, pulled by a mule too thin to live long. The driver was a woman, straight back despite the heat, jaw locked in a way that told of someone who'd learned never to beg. Beside her sat a boy, 6, maybe 7, light in frame, but sharp in gaze, gripping the side rail like he expected it to vanish from under him. He didn't speak. Neither did she. Silence stretched between them, and the man on the porch like a drawn wire. She stepped down first. Wore a plain dress, faded blue. Her boots were cracked, her hands calloused. No wedding ring, no bonnet, no pretense. Just dust, sweat, and the weight of what she carried alone. He met her eyes for the first time, dark, steady, unflinching. There was no softness in her, no asking. She was not a woman in need of saving. She was a woman past the point of rescue. The boy slid down next, kept behind her hip. He didn't speak, didn't smile. He just looked up at the house the way a coyote studies a new den, calculating the danger inside. The man stepped off the porch, boots crunching on the dry earth. No greeting past his lips, just a nod, slow and grim. She answered it with one of her own. There had been no ceremony, no vows, no preacher, just a letter from the sheriff. Terms scribbled in rough hand. Widow, no kin, needs shelter. You owe back taxes. This settles both. He hadn't replied, just hitched the gate open and left the door unlocked. Now, she walked past him without waiting for permission. The boy followed. Their footsteps creaked across the porch, through the threshold, into the dim stillness of the cabin. Inside, the place smelled of smoke and cedar. A fire smoldered low. A cot stood by the hearth, another in the back room. She claimed the hearth without asking, rolled out a blanket, pulled the boy close, and lay down with her back to the man. He sat at the table for a long time after that, listening to the pop of wood, the slow rhythm of her breath. The boy didn't sleep. He stared at him through the flicker of firelight, watchful, like a pup guarding its only bone. Morning came without ceremony. She stoked the fire, boiled water, cut stale bread. She worked with efficient silence, as if every motion had once meant survival. When he stepped into the kitchen, she handed him a tin plate. No words, no thanks. He ate. The boy sat in the corner, drawing in the dirt with a stick. Circles, mostly. Sometimes eyes. Never mouths. Later that week, she followed him out to the fields. He didn't ask her to. She simply picked up a hoe and started turning soil. The sun beat down hard, but she worked steady, never wiping her brow. When he paused, she didn't. When he offered water, she took it without looking at him. At night, they didn't talk. He read the Bible. She mended a shirt. The boy carved shapes into wood. 3 lives in the same house, moving like planets, separate, orbiting, never quite colliding. Word spread fast, as it always did in places where nothing new happened. The preacher left a dog-eared Bible on the porch, then didn't return. The shopkeeper watched her like she'd lifted something even when she hadn't. A white woman muttered, which under her breath in passing. The man said nothing, but he noticed how the woman kept her head high, even as whispers snapped at her heels like dogs. How the boy smiled only when she brushed his hair back at night. How her hands sometimes shook before she picked up the coffee pot in the morning, but never when holding a blade. On the 7th night, he stood at the edge of the porch, watching the wind ripple the tall grass. She joined him, arms crossed. They didn't speak for a long time. Then she asked, "Why me?" Her voice was quiet, shaped by a place far east, but hardened by time. He didn't answer right away, just stared out the horizon, where red sky bled into black. Finally, he said, "Didn't have a choice." A lie, one she knew the shape of and hated more than the truth. She turned away, walked inside. He stayed there long after the door closed. The air smelled of rain that hadn't come yet. Dust curled up in tiny spirals. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and his hand drifted down toward his belt where the pistol always waited. That night, he dreamed of fire, of screams from long ago, of children hiding beneath floorboards, and smoke so thick it stole names. When he woke, sweat-drenched, he could hear her humming, low, steady, lullaby soft, a song without language. The boy slept curled beside her. Her back was to him. He stood in the doorway for a long time, watching, listening. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone, not safe, not forgiven, but no longer alone. The wind came harder that week, driving dust in sheets across the plains, coating windows, slipping beneath door frames. It made everything feel brittle, like the world itself might crack. Inside the cabin, the woman found a creaking floorboard. She hadn't meant to, just shifting the cot to sweep. But when the plank gave slightly under her boot, she stopped, waited, pressed again. Hollow, carefully, she knelt, wedged her fingers into the seam, and pulled. The board lifted with a groan. Beneath it, darkness. Then a tin box. She opened it slowly. Inside, folded paper yellowed and brittle. A silver buckle tarnished green. A rusted pistol. A blood-stained handkerchief wrapped around something heavier. The letters bore Confederate insignia. One of them, signed in the same hand that now split firewood outside, mentioned a raid on a freed settlement in Arkansas, burned down to smoke and bones. Her eyes caught the name of the unit. Her jaw locked. She folded everything back exactly as she found it, replaced the board, and swept as if nothing had changed. But the room felt colder, as though the dead had come in with the dust. At supper, she laid the tin on the table. Didn't say a word. He walked in, saw it, froze mid-step. His eyes didn't go to her. They locked on the box. "You bury that," she said, voice flat, no inflection. "But you don't burn it." He didn't sit, just stared at the thing like it might start hissing. "That ain't me anymore," he said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The boy sat nearby, whittling a crooked stick. He watched both of them. Later that night, the box was gone. Buried again, deeper this time. But she didn't need to check. She could see it in the way he moved, the heaviness in his limbs, the look behind his eyes that spoke of smoke and memory. The next day, she began teaching the boy how to shoot. They started with a slingshot, tin cans balanced on fence posts. He was quick, careful. She corrected his stance without raising her voice, only adjusting his elbow with 2 fingers. By the end of the week, he was hitting every mark. The man didn't interfere, just watched from the porch, arms crossed, unreadable. At night, she tucked the boy into his cot by the hearth and returned to her mending. Her sewing grew slower, her stitches neater. But sometimes her hands trembled just a flicker before returning to steadiness. He spoke little, but more than before, asked about her garden plans, if she preferred coffee black or with sugar, small things, the words of a man unsure if he was allowed care. The townsfolk noticed her more now, or perhaps they simply grew bolder. A woman dropped a basket outside the store and muttered, "Asterisk," which blood always stirs trouble. Asterisk, another man stared long at the boy before spitting into dirt and walking off. When she returned home, she sat outside for a long while. The man joined her, silent. After a stretch of silence, she said, "They don't hate me. They hate what I remind them of." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't have to. He knew. That night, she asked about the raid. Not directly, just said, "Arkansas, 1865, that was you?" His shoulders dropped slightly, like something inside had given up resisting. He nodded once. "Why?" she asked. He didn't answer for a long time. Then, quietly, "Because I believed the wrong men. And I liked how it felt not to be powerless." Her eyes flicked toward him. And now I bury things. The boy had fallen asleep against her side, his hand still clutching the wood carving. You ever ask forgiveness? She asked. No, he said. Didn't think I deserved it. The fire crackled. Outside, coyotes yipped in the distance, and a hawk called sharp against the black sky. You don't get to decide that, she said. You only get to ask. He watched her for a long time, but her gaze was on the fire, not on him. The next morning, the chicken coop was burning. They ran outside to smoke and feathers. Flames leapt from the dry wood. He kicked the door open, freed the remaining hens. The boy threw water from a bucket. She beat back sparks with her shawl. By the time it was out, the coop was blackened and half the chickens were dead, carved into the barn wall in a rough hand. Devils don't get heaven. She stared at the words, unmoving, then turned, walked into the cabin, and came out with a rifle. He stepped in front of her, hand on the barrel. You shoot someone, this town will make sure you vanish. I didn't survive this long to go quiet, she said. He held her eyes, and for the first time she saw fear there, not of death, but of her. Later, she walked the edge of the property with the boy, showing him where to hide. She pointed out places to run, paths through tall grass, the bend in the stream that led to a deer trail. You ever hear shouting, you run, she told him. He looked up at her. What about you? She didn't answer. That night, the man sat beside her, knees close, not touching. He pulled out a small pouch, opened it. Inside a ring, gold plain scratched. Was my mother's, he said. She didn't wear it long. She didn't ask why, just stared at the circle in his palm. I didn't marry you for love, he said. I did it 'cause I owed too much to too many. She exhaled, slow. And now, he looked up. Now I'm learning to want what I already have. She didn't take the ring, but she didn't walk away. The boy came out, sleepy-eyed, holding his carving, a crude horse with one broken leg. Can we ride tomorrow? He asked. She looked at the man. He nodded once. Sunup, she told the boy. He grinned, then ran back inside. The man stood. Why'd you take him? Her voice was quiet but firm, because he was left behind. Same as me. The moon climbed higher, pale and full, casting silver over prairie. Inside, the floorboard creaked as the boy shifted in sleep. The woman sat alone now, the wind tugging at her shawl. The air smelled like something coming, storm maybe, or reckoning. But for the first time since she'd stepped onto that land, she didn't feel hunted. She felt ready. The sky turned copper when the first rider came back. He wasn't loud. No war cry. No threat scream from the ridge. Just a silhouette watching from a rise, rifle slung loose over one shoulder. The woman saw him first while hanging linens, caught his figure between two swaying sheets. She didn't scream. She folded the fabric and walked calmly back toward the cabin. The man came out with a rifle slung over his shoulder and his mouth drawn in a tight line. He looked up at the ridge and stood there a while, as if willing the rider to vanish. But the figure only turned his horse, slow and deliberate, then rode off without a word. That night, he cleaned his pistol with the precision of someone expecting to use it. The woman didn't ask questions. She just watched his hands move, each part oiled and reassembled like a prayer. You know him? She asked. He nodded. He used to call me brother. Used to. The flint in his eyes sparked. We buried that bond the day he lit a church full of children. The fire popped. Shadows danced on the walls. The boy sat quiet in the corner, whittling again, something smaller this time, with finer edges. They're not here for you, she said eventually. They're here for what you walked away from. They want gold, he said, or blood, whichever's easier. In the morning, they rode the property line together. She wore her pistol on her hip. He carried a shotgun across his lap. They found hoof prints near the stream, fresh, crushed grass, empty shell casings. The riders had come close in the night. He started digging shallow trenches behind the barn, set lines of rusted pots filled with broken glass and nails. She gathered rope and laid tripwires. They moved like people who'd done this before, not just preparing for attack, but expecting it. The boy helped quietly, hauled buckets, coiled wire, sharpened sticks into points. There was no panic in him, only focus. He watched them carefully, imitating their movements. The land was no longer just a home. It was something they had to defend. That evening, the man built a fire behind the barn, too far to see from the porch. Around it, he taught the boy how to listen for footsteps in the dark, how to tell wind from breathing, how to aim without blinking. The woman watched, arms crossed. She didn't stop him. Later, she told her story. They sat by the hearth, the boy asleep with his carving in hand. She looked at the flames, not at the man. "I married a white officer during the war," she said. "He said I'd be safe with his name." The man didn't speak. He didn't mean it. He used me to pass through places a white man couldn't go alone. When peace came, he sold me to his cousin for a wagon and 2 horses. The boy is not mine. He belonged to that cousin's sister. She died, coughing blood before the winter broke. She closed her eyes briefly. I buried them both and walked until I found a town that didn't slam the door before I spoke. The man didn't offer pity, just poured a cup of water and handed it to her. "You could have killed him," he said. "I did." She drank slowly. "You could have run farther." "I ran until I wasn't running. That's where I found you." Silence settled between them, heavy but not cruel. He looked at the child, at the slight rise and fall of his chest, the way he clutched the carving in his sleep. "He calls me Pa now," the man said softly. "And you let him," she replied. He nodded. Outside, the wind picked up. Dust hissed across the shutters. Horses neighed faintly in the distance. Then silence, a heavy kind, expectant. They didn't sleep. At dawn, smoke rose from the far ridge, black and oily. The riders had burned a traveler's wagon. The flames still danced when they reached the site. No bodies, just ash, a torn boot, and an abandoned prayer book half-scorched. The woman bent and picked it up. The first page bore a child's name. "They're sending messages," she said. The man nodded, trying to make us feel small. She turned her eyes toward the hills. "They don't know how much I've already lost." They rode back in silence. The boy met them at the gate, rifle in hand, grip firm. He didn't smile, just stood sentry like he belonged there. That night, the man loaded cartridges with her at the table. The boy fell asleep between them, arms curled under his head. The woman reached across the table, touched the man's fingers. "Just once. I know you didn't marry me for love," she said, "but you stayed." "I stayed because it mattered," he said, "not just to you." "No," he agreed, "not anymore." Outside, wolves howled into the dark. A thunderhead loomed in the distance. Lightning stitched his belly with pale thread. The earth smelled of blood and iron and rain. He placed the last bullet in the box, closed the lid, and met her eyes across the flickering table. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." And for the first time, she reached out and held his hand. Not for comfort, for readiness. The storm came with no warning. No thunder, no crack of lightning, only a stillness too deep to trust. Then the sound of hooves, many, galloping like a heartbeat down the spine of the land. Dust rose from the trail in long, choking plumes. The woman looked out the window and didn't blink. She reached for her rifle with a steadiness carved by years of learning to live without panic. The man already stood on the porch, coat buttoned, pistol holstered tight, shotgun across his chest. The boy crouched low behind the crates near the barn, hands gripping the stock of a rifle that still looked too large as arms. His jaw was set. He wouldn't run unless she told him. 3 riders came first, then 5 more. By the time the last one crested the hill, there were 9. Dust-caked, bearded, sunburnt men with old Confederate rags tied around their necks like rotten banners. At the front rode the one from the ridge, the one who had once called a man brother. The leader rode up slowly, stopping just outside the range of the shotgun. His horse snorted, stamping. He tipped his hat back and grinned. "You always were stubborn," he said. "But that woman, that child, you really think they're worth dying for?" The man didn't respond, just shifted the shotgun slightly. The message was clear. "Come with us," the rider continued. "Help us hit the payroll coach." No blood has to spill here. You spilled it already? The man said. You just didn't see it. The grin faded. The leader spat into the dirt. You were good once. Efficient. You could be again. The woman stepped onto the porch, rifle resting at her side. I'd leave now, she said, voice like gravel over bone. The leader's eyes narrowed. You the reason he's gone soft? He asked. You think you matter to a man like that? Her aim lifted before she answered. Her finger on the trigger did the talking. The man stepped forward. You cross that fence, you won't cross back. It was the last kindness he offered. The outlaws retreated back to the ridge, but everyone knew they returned under cover of dark. They moved quickly after that. Barricaded windows, tied bells to fence posts, scattered broken glass across the path to the barn. The woman showed the boy how to load rounds with calm, exacting fingers. The man filled lanterns and set oil traps. As dusk sank into night, he paused beside her at the edge of the porch. They'll come for me, he said. She looked at him, unmoved. They'll find all of us. The boy stood between them, silent. He looked up. Do I shoot if I'm scared? The woman knelt to his height. You shoot to protect, never out of fear. He nodded once, solemn. Night brought wind first, rushing low and hot across the plain. Then the crack of a branch behind the shed. Then silence again. Then hell. Gunfire sparked the dark. A lantern shattered against the barn. Flames bloomed wild in the straw. The man dropped to one knee and fired twice. Two shadows fell hard. The woman circled wide, staying low, using the darkness. Her first shot hit a rider square in the chest. Her second went through a leg. A scream tore into the night. The boy stayed crouched. He didn't move until one rider got too close, creeping toward the cabin from the east fence. Then he rose slowly and fired. The bullet missed, but not by much. The second didn't. The rider slumped, groaning. The man fought like someone trying not to become what he used to be. Brutal, precise, unrelenting. A blade to the gut, a rifle but to the temple. Each man that fell seemed to pull another memory from him, and he buried them one by one in blood and grit. She moved with him back to back. No orders exchanged. No shouts. Just instinct. At one point, she took a bullet to the arm, bit back the pain and kept firing. He saw the blood, tried to pull her behind cover, but she shoved him forward. Not now, she hissed. Keep moving. Only two outlaws remained by dawn. One fled across the ridgeline, leaving his horse behind. The other, the leader, stood in the middle of the field, shotgun lowered, shirt soaked in red. The man approached slowly, no weapon in hand. You go to beg? The outlaw asked, wheezing. No, he said. I came to bury you. They fought without words. Fists, elbows, knees in the dust. Both men bleeding, staggering. The woman stood nearby, too weak now to interfere, one arm hanging limp. The boy held a rifle but didn't raise it, just watched. The man finally forced the outlaw to his knees, drew a blade, and held it steady. You never had the stomach for mercy, the outlaw sneered. The man hesitated. Behind him, the woman said, He does now. The blade dropped. The man stepped back. The outlaw laughed once, just once, before he collapsed forward, choking on blood. The boy never saw what struck him, but when the man turned, there was blood on his boots and dust in his teeth, and his eyes had none of the old fire left. They buried the bodies in silence, marked no graves. The barn was mostly ash. The porch had bullet holes. The windows were gone, but the house stood. That night, she sat on the porch, bandaged and sore. He brought her coffee, black, strong. The boy slept inside, one hand on his carving. A crooked horse, now smooth with wear. The man reached into his coat and pulled something from the inside pocket. The ring, still plain, still gold. He didn't offer it, just held it in his palm. I married you out of duty, he said, but I'd stay out of choice. She looked at him a long while, then reached over and closed his fingers around the ring. You don't have to ask again, she said. He nodded. Then, finally, she smiled, just a flicker. but enough.